There is one topic I wanted to make a video about for a very long time now, but I never really got the chance to do it. That is until now. I'm talking about stereoscopic vision in astronomy using binoviewers. Having the ability to observe with both eyes simultaneously is, in my opinion, a game changer, and in today's video we are going to talk about it. This is also going to be my second video in this series about binoviewers, where I'm going to go into more details about the different types, how they work, and what their strengths and weaknesses are. So without any further ado, let's get this show on the road. Hi, I'm Bogdan Damian, and welcome to another deep dive video. In astronomy, stereoscopic vision can greatly enhance the observing experience. Aspects such as a higher perceived brightness, contrast, and magnification, as well as a lot less strain on the eyes, are a direct result of observing with both eyes simultaneously. The optical device allowing us to make these kinds of observations is called, of course, a binoviewer. Binos specifically designed for use with telescopes began to emerge in the late 1990s and early 2000s. One of the early pioneers that started making and selling binoviewers for telescopes was the company Denkmeyer Optical, founded by Russell Lederman. With the Denkmeyer standard binoviewer launched in the early 2000s, they changed observations for amateur astronomers forever. Other manufacturers, such as Baader Planetarium and Teleview, also played important roles in the development and refinement of binoviewers for telescopes. These companies introduced their own versions of binos with improved optical quality, mechanical stability, and ergonomic features. I recently had the chance to test Baader's MaxBright 2 bino, and I quite enjoyed it. I also made a detailed video about it, and you should check it out if you want to learn more about it. I leave a link down below. But since those early days, other companies launched even more binos, which can basically be split into two design categories. The first one uses multiple prisms to refract the light. This is the classic tried and true bino design. And the second, newer design, which uses a combination of mirrors and lenses to split and reflect the light to achieve a zero-optical-path design. Let's look at these designs in more detail by starting with a prismatic binoviewer. As already mentioned, this design works by employing multiple prisms to refract the light delivered by the telescope. Here the light first encounters a group of two prisms cemented to each other. The first one is shaped like a rhomboid and the other one like a cylinder cut diagonally, the latter being a 90-degree prism. The surfaces between these act like a beam splitter and refracts the light into two separate directions. The left beam of light enters a second rhomboid prism, which refracts the light and points it towards the eyepiece opening at the back. The right beam exits the first rhomboid prism and enters a glass cylinder that has the exact necessary length to match the length of the light path on the other side. This ensures that the light on both channels travel in synchrony. Then, after leaving the glass cylinder, the light exits the bino on this side as well. So each channel receives the full width of the light beam, but with 50% intensity for each eye. This is a very important distinction, especially with respect to the other binoviewer design, which we are going to look at later in the video. When viewed by both eyes simultaneously, the resulting combined image features, at least in theory, 100% of the intensity and information of the initial light beam that entered the bino. One of the more popular binos using this prismatic design is the MaxBright 2 from Baader Planetarium. It's a great and easy to use optical device that is capable of delivering a very good image quality. But it can't do it all by itself. it needs help in managing the light, and this is done by pairing it with a special lens called a glass path corrector, or GPC in short. These lenses are placed before the bino and play two major roles in preparing and adjusting the light before it enters the bino. The first role is to generate back focus by moving the focal point of the telescope outwards, so that the image can be focused when a bino is added. But why is this necessary? Well, there are only a few telescope designs and models out there that have enough back focus to allow for sharp images when prismatic binos are being used. So what exactly does this mean? Well, it means that I now get to use my old school drawing board to show you how a focuser works. This is overly simplified, but this is a refractor's focuser assembly, and this telescope, just like every other telescope, has a fixed focal point in space that is somewhere near the focuser on the optical axis. Also, every telescope has the means to focus the light either by moving the primary mirror or by moving the draw tube in and out along the optical axis. In this case, the draw tube moves when you turn the focuser wheel, and this mechanism helps the eyepiece, camera or other accessories reach that focal point precisely. Only then the image becomes sharp. Now, with this in mind, imagine adding another 10 to 15 centimeters to the focuser's end in form of a binoviewer. And here, to make it easier to understand, we are going to ignore the diagonal and attach the bino directly to the focuser. So now the focuser somehow needs to compensate for the extra length by moving inwards relative to the fixed focal point of the telescope. The problem here is that most focusers aren't able to compensate for the extra distance the light has to travel when a bino is added. A catadioptric telescope like an SCT might be able to pull it off, but other telescope types like refractors or especially Newtonian reflectors with their short focuser's draw tube most likely will not. This is why GPCs are needed. These Berlow-like lenses come with different specifications that modify the light beam in such a way that precious millimeters of back focus can be gained. They achieve this by moving the fixed focal point of the telescope outwards by a certain length. With the focal point now located further back along the optical axis, the draw tube of the telescope can reach it without a problem. For example, I like working with GPCs from Baader Planetarium because they are good quality, but also because they tell you exactly how much back focus can be gained when using one. This way I can calculate the exact length of the path the light has to travel until it reaches my eye, and I can plan accordingly. Moving the focal point back also means a magnification increase, which will have an effect on the eyepieces you are using, just like when you are using a Berlow lens. So keep this in mind as well. The second role of the GPC is to correct for chromatic aberrations in refractor telescopes. Refracting a light beam, unfortunately, also means that if not corrected, the different wavelengths of light get refracted in slightly different locations, leading to slightly different focal points. This effect is called chromatic aberration or color fringing, and refractor telescopes are especially susceptible to it. Usually, in entry and mid-level refractors, the objective isn't able to fully correct the incoming light, and if nothing is done about it to further correct it, then the aberrations will only get worse when a bino is added to the system, since the light will get refracted inside the bino multiple times before exiting, and any existing optical errors will get amplified. This is why with refractors, GPCs are recommended in order to correct for these errors, or at least to not make them worse when pairing them with a bino. Incidentally, this is also what makes prismatic binos great. If you take care of the light before it enters the bino and sort the whole light path length out, then the bino itself will alter the light very little on its way to your eyes. which at the end of the day means excellent image quality for both your eyes. Also, the fact that it only uses prisms makes the whole optical device relatively durable and maintenance-free. Not subjected to strong shocks, a prismatic bino should last a lifetime. On the flip side, all this not only means that you need to do a lot of research before buying, it also means a significant cost increase, since these GPCs don't come cheap. And on top of it, you will likely also need a couple of adapter rings to make everything fit together nicely. Alright, but what about the other type of binoviewers? You know, the ones that cancel the extra light path out. After all, those are being advertised as completely plug and play, no fancy glass path correctors or other accessory required. Well, let's take a closer look and see if those are really that easy and carefree to use. First introduced to the world in 2014 by Kasai Trading, a Japanese company renowned for manufacturing quality astronomical equipment, this new approach to binoviewers is completely different compared to the traditional prismatic design. And since its release, it has gained some considerable traction among hobby astronomers. Today, there are multiple brands like Orion, Omegon, Lacerta, TS Optics and so on selling this design under their own name. So how do these work? Well, for starters, this design doesn't use any prisms and relies only on mirrors and lenses. First, the light passes through a series of lenses that correct the light as best as possible before hitting the knife-edge mirror located exactly at the bino center. This very sharp mirror then splits the light into two separate beams, one for each channel. Each of the two light beams then hit another mirror, reflecting them another 90 degrees towards the eyepiece openings at the back. All this reflecting causes the different wavelengths of light to significantly become out of sync relative to each other, which is why each channel is then passed through another separate set of lenses meant to correct this issue, thus eliminating any chromatic aberrations that might have been created inside the bino. Not only this, but thanks to these lenses, the focal point is carefully adjusted so that the total length of the light path inside the bino is almost completely negated, hence the name Zero-Optical-Path bino. Because these binos offer a near linear, uninterrupted light path that minimizes or eliminates any additional optical path length, they are sometimes also referred to as linear binos. So the terms zero-optical-path binoviewers and linear binoviewers are used interchangeably. While all of this sounds really good, there is one major drawback to this design. Remember what we said before about the prismatic bino, where the delivered light, while covering 100% of the field of view, only features 50% of the initial intensity when viewed per channel. Well, in the case of the linear bino, the resulting image per channel features 100% intensity, but only 50% of the field of view is visible. And this looks something like this. When looking through the bino, each eye sees only half of the image. Your brain is then responsible for the task of stitching the full image together. And if this sounds tricky, well, then it's because it is. You see, the whole concept of linear binoviewers relies on them being perfectly, and I really mean perfectly, collimated. The margin for error also decreases as the magnification increases. So any small misalignment of the two halves of the image will require increasing brain power to stitch together. Beyond a certain point, the brain will not be able to fully compensate for the misalignment, leading to blurry images and headache during prolonged observing sessions. So while the potential for a great bino is definitely there, in reality, alignment problems due to poor quality control can often lead to a subpar viewing experience. Another downside of this linear design is the small aperture. This tells you how wide the beam of light traveling through the bino is, and since eyepieces come after the bino, these are going to be restricted by how much light they receive from the bino. This is important when you take into consideration the field stop of the eyepiece. Here it is recommended to choose eyepieces with field stops that don't exceed the width of the clear aperture of the bino. If the field stop of the eyepiece is wider than the clear aperture of the bino, then the bino won't be able to fully illuminate the eyepiece, resulting in darkened edges of the field of view when looking through the eyepiece. This effect is also called vignetting. Here, the 17.4mm clear aperture of the Kasai bino design is too narrow to fully illuminate longer focal length eyepieces with wider field of views, like the 24mm panoptic from Teleview, which, for example, features a 27mm field stop. This is especially restrictive since these binos don't need any glass path correctors that might help in this regard. This is because a glass path corrector acts like a Barlow lens, increasing the magnification of the resulting image. A higher magnification also means a narrower true field of view, which can help a lot if the eyepiece can't be fully illuminated by the bino. So sticking with shorter focal length eyepieces that can be fully illuminated is recommended here, which on its own is totally fine. But if we take this chain of thought further, we discover that a pair of short focal length eyepieces will deliver a higher magnification, which, as we saw earlier, is more demanding for the bino's optics. Any potential misalignment problems here will be more exaggerated the higher the magnification becomes, and this in turn can greatly diminish the viewing experience. The aspect of not requiring a glass path corrector in itself sure is a good thing, but taking into consideration the narrow clear aperture as well, the picture changes. So what up until now was considered to be a positive aspect, it becomes less positive and maybe even a potential problem. Okay, so me being harsh with respect to the linear bino doesn't mean that this design is flawed and I don't like it. This certainly isn't the case. I actually think it's a great option, especially for Newtonian telescopes. But the zero-optical-path design is very complex and might not be as robust as a traditional prismatic approach. I guess what I'm trying to say is that you shouldn't base your purchasing decision solely on marketing talk like zero-optical-path, but do some research first. Take your exact setup into consideration when looking to get a linear bino. And this applies to prismatic binoviewers as well. Talking about things to take into consideration when planning for a binoviewer, I want to mention one more thing that applies to all binoviewer types. I'm talking about weight and the potential negative effect it can have on the whole rig. When adding a bino with two eyepieces and maybe a diagonal, a glass path corrector and other adapters, the load on the telescope and mount increases considerably. And not only this influences the balance of the whole rig, but this also puts a strain on all the joints and elements that need to be tightened up, meaning that every eyepiece clamp and adapter on the rig need to be really tightened up, or otherwise they will slowly give way under load, especially on an EQ mount where the whole telescope moves and rotates as you pan around. For example, by adding the MaxBright 2 bino with two SV503 SuperZoom eyepieces and a glass path corrector plus adapters, the weight of the whole rig increased by almost 2 kilograms, which is quite a lot. So keep this in mind when planning for a bino setup as well. Binoviewers can be intimidating at first, understandably so, since there are more than a few things to consider and get right before even purchasing one. And then there is the cost of acquiring everything. Not only are binos by themselves expensive, but you suddenly need 2 of each of your favorite eyepieces to go with your new bino, and some new adapters and glass path correctors as well, which will only drive the total cost up. But even if this seems like a lot to keep track of and pay for, the possibility of observing the night sky with both eyes, I believe, is worth it. In my opinion, there are only very few upgrades that you can make to an astro rig that truly are capable of leaping the viewing experience forward. And upgrading from mono to stereo vision is one of them. Anyway, that's been it. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe if you did. Also, let me know what type of Binoviewer is your favorite. I'm very much looking forward to reading your opinions in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and catch you guys in the next one.